Pedro was the son of Selena, a sharp and calculating woman born into a family of immense wealth and influence. Selena's family held the reins of the prestigious Royal Hotel chain, a symbol of luxury and legacy. She had 2 children, Marcia, the ambitious and cold-blooded daughter from her first marriage, and Pedro, her youngest, born of a fleeting second union. Marcia, relentless and disdainful, harbored a deep resentment toward her half-brother. To her, Pedro was an unworthy rival, a shadow threatening her dreams of sole control over Royal Hotel's empire. Pedro, however, carried burdens of his own, burdens shaped by a childhood defined as much by love as by its sudden absence. As a boy, Pedro adored his father, Mr. Leonardo, a man with an unyielding warmth and a dreamer's heart. His father cherished moments spent playing and talking with Pedro, a bond that, for a while, made their grand and isolating home feel less cold. But one fateful morning shattered everything. Pedro woke to silence where there was once laughter. Dressed and eager for the usual breakfast ritual with his father, he realized something was amiss. The nanny, who normally doted on him, dismissed his questions with a vague urgency. "Come now, Pedro. Breakfast and then school. Quickly, no time to dawdle." The dining room felt cavernous that day, empty chairs, no familiar faces, just Pedro alone at the long table. Again, he pressed the nanny. "Where's Papa? And Mama?" Her tight smile faltered, but she said nothing. That silence would echo for years. Leonardo had been driven away not by choice, but by decree. Selena's father, the imperious patriarch who lorded over the Royal Hotel empire, saw to that. To him, Leonardo was a liability, a man with ideals instead of ambition, dreams instead of cunning. The old man, in his gilded office atop the Royal Hotel flagship, had laid it out plainly to Selena. "Selena, I told you from the start that I didn't approve of Leonardo. A man like him, idealistic, soft, and full of nonsensical ideas, has no place in this family. I gave him a chance, more than he deserved. I gave him a job at the Royal Hotel, let him stand shoulder to shoulder with men far better than him. And do you know what he did? Tried to poison my employees' minds. Told them to demand higher wages, health insurance, even accused me of being heartless." Heartless? The old man's voice thundered, sharp as the crystal chandelier above his desk. "He's a dreamer, Selena. But dreams don't build empires. Men like him destroy them." Selena listened, impassive, as her father continued. His words, for all their fury, suited her aims perfectly. "He wanted to leave, Selena. He told me he couldn't work here any longer. I didn't stop him. In fact, I made it clear he would never contact Pedro, you, or this family again. If he does, I'll crush him. Pedro doesn't need a father like that. What he needs is the discipline to inherit what we've built. Let his father's ideals poison his mind, and we'll have raised another failure." Selena nodded, her expression calm, almost indifferent. "You did the right thing, father," she replied, her voice like ice. "It makes everything easier for me. I don't need to explain anything to Leonardo, he already knows where he stands." Pedro never saw his father again. Selena had traded love for loyalty, warmth for power. The little boy's world became one of silences, unanswered questions, and an aching emptiness that no luxury of the Royal Hotel could fill. "I agree with you completely. I want Pedro to be exactly like Marcia, intelligent, skillful, ambitious. Just like everyone in our family is." Selena, a woman of ice and ambition, rarely spared time for motherhood. She did not raise her own son. Her thoughts were consumed by a singular goal: inheriting the empire her father built and cementing her place as the uncontested ruler of the Royal Hotel dynasty. Time moves swiftly, as it does. Selena's father passed away, leaving her the crown of his legacy. Selena became the president of the Royal Hotel empire, though in practice, Marcia ruled. Marcia, sharp and unyielding, thrived in her role, intoxicated by the power and the possibility of becoming the majority owner. Pedro, on the other hand, grew into a man of striking beauty but carried a heart weighed down by the fractures of his childhood. His golden exterior concealed an aching sadness, his serious demeanor creating an air of distance, almost unapproachability. Pedro had not lived with his mother for years. Before his death, Selena's father left him a vast fortune, an inheritance that allowed him a life of luxury, yet one devoid of purpose. In France, Pedro's days were marked by isolation. No friends, no lovers, his existence was solitary, his loneliness a constant shadow. One day, Pedro decided to visit his mother. Their bond was tenuous, built on obligation rather than affection. He carried with him a lingering wound, Selena's silence about his father. No one had ever spoken of what happened to him. Whenever Pedro broached the subject, the conversation twisted and turned until it vanished altogether. When Pedro arrived at Selena's grand estate, their greeting was restrained, a formality rather than a reunion. They loved each other, but it was a love veiled in frost. Marcia soon swept into the room, wearing a mask of affection that she wielded with expert precision. To Selena, she played the doting sister, but Pedro knew the truth. Marcia despised him. Her hatred was visceral, rooted in jealousy and a fear that Pedro might upend her plans. As they sat together, Selena broached the topic of the Royal Hotel. "Pedro, I want you to get more involved in the family business. You should learn from your sister how to run it." Marcia, ever quick, interjected with her signature blend of charm and subtle mockery. "Mom, don't scare Pedro like that. He's barely arrived, and you're already trying to recruit him." Selena ignored Marcia's quip. She turned to Pedro with an unusual warmth. "Stay the night," she said. "I'd like you to." Pedro agreed, more to appease her than out of desire to stay. That evening, Marcia, calculating as always, invited Pedro for a walk in the garden. Under the pale moonlight, her true self emerged. "You should stay at the hotel," she began, her tone dripping with icy disdain. "We don't need your negativity dragging everyone down. Pedro, I'll pay you a fortune enough to keep you far away from us. You're not wanted here. I don't like you, and I never will." Pedro's voice was steady, his pain buried beneath layers of pride. "Marcia, why do you hate me so much? I've done nothing to you. I'm your brother, we're family." "You're not my brother," she hissed, her mask slipping entirely. "You've always been the favorite. My mother and grandfather adored you, and for what? I don't want you here wasting my time. Here's the key to the best VIP suite at the hotel. Stay there, and then go back to France. Take the money, disappear, and leave us in peace. No one here remembers you, just like no one remembers your father." Pedro held her gaze, unflinching. "I have more money than I'll ever need, Marcia. I don't need your scraps. Good night. Now go back inside and spin another one of your lies for our mother. You're good at that." Marcia returned to the house, her fury masked by a serene facade. She went straight to Selena's room. Pedro decided to go to the hotel, she lied, her voice saccharine. "He said it would be more comfortable for him. Don't be upset, Mom. Pedro's a good boy. Let him make his own decisions." Selena regarded Marcia with a mix of doubt and exhaustion. "I'm going to offer Pedro a job," she said. "I want him to learn the business, to understand what it takes to run the Royal Hotel." Marcia's stomach churned with rage, though her smile remained fixed. "Mom, I don't think Pedro is interested in working here or learning anything about the hotel." Selena's gaze hardened. "He doesn't have to want it, Marcia. This is his family, his legacy. One of you will lead the business, but I need to see what Pedro is capable of." Marcia burned with hatred, her thoughts racing. She would not, could not, allow Pedro to stand in her way. If he accepted Selena's proposal, Marcia vowed to make his life unbearable. The next morning, Selena rose before the sun. She left for the Royal Hotel to meet Pedro in the presidential suite. As they sat in the vast office, Selena laid out her vision for him, her expectations clear yet hopeful. Pedro listened, weighing her words. Just as he was about to respond, the door opened. Marcia walked in, her entrance casual, but her eyes sharp. "Good morning," she said, her voice sweet as syrup. "What were you two discussing?" "Mom, you left the house so early, I didn't even see you." Selena and Pedro exchanged a glance. "Good morning, Marcia," they said in unison. "Oh, just continuing yesterday's conversation," Selena replied. Pedro was about to share his thoughts when you came in. Marcia's smile was razor-thin. "Well, Pedro, What do you think of my mother's proposal?" Pedro looked at Marcia and said, "You mean our mother?" Of course, our mother," Marcia replied, her tone laced with exaggerated sweetness. "I'm so used to referring to her without you being around that I forget sometimes." "Then why don't you just get to the point and tell me what's your answer?" she pressed, her eyes glinting with impatience. Pedro studied his sister, his gaze sharp, mocking. "You seem far more anxious than I am, Marcia. Why is that?" Marcia narrowed her eyes but maintained her composure. "It's just your imagination, Pedro. I'm merely curious to see if you're capable of handling such a serious responsibility." Pedro, deliberate and reflective as always, turned his attention to his mother. "I don't think I'm ready for a responsibility like this, Mom." Selina's expression hardened, her frustration barely concealed. "Pedro, tell me, when will you be ready? If you don't start now, you never will be. This is no game, Pedro. I'm leaving behind an empire, and I need to know which of you can shoulder that burden." Pedro's voice grew quieter, steadier. "Mom, I don't want anything from the Royal Hotel. Grandfather made sure I was financially secure. I have no interest in fighting for a position that isn't mine." Selina's lips tightened, but it was Marcia who seized the opportunity. "Stop being so stubborn, Pedro. You need to learn how to manage the family business." Pedro shot her a sardonic glance. "Family, Marcia? Really?" Marcia didn't miss a beat. "Of course, my dear brother. We are a family, and it's our duty to come together to continue our grandfather's legacy and support our mother's vision." Pedro's patience snapped. Rising from his chair, he said with quiet finality, "I'm going back to France tomorrow." Selina, visibly hurt by her son's decision, tried to salvage the moment. "Can you at least have dinner with me before you leave?" Pedro hesitated, then nodded. "Of course, Mom. What time is dinner?" "The usual time, Pedro." With a polite but distant nod, Pedro excused himself and left the room. Marcia, ever the opportunist, turned to her mother with calculated concern. "Mom, you have to understand, Pedro is still young. Losing his father when he was so little didn't help him grow into the man you hoped he'd be." Selina's expression darkened. "Enough, Marcia. I don't want that subject brought up in this house. What my father did was for the best. And another thing, don't mistreat Pedro. He has as much right to this family as you do. I'll convince him to join the business, even if it doesn't happen overnight." Marcia wisely chose not to argue further, though her bitterness festered. Deep down, she believed Selina always favored Pedro. In truth, Selina's guilt over her father's actions and her own complicity weighed heavily on her. Despite her ambition, she had loved Pedro's father, Leonardo, in her own silent, conflicted way. Later that evening, Pedro returned to the Royal Hotel and booked his ticket to France. Early the next morning, as he prepared for his departure, Marcia stormed into his room without so much as knocking, using her master key. Pedro looked up, irritation flashing across his face. "Do you always barge into your guests' rooms uninvited? Or is it just me?" Marcia's hatred, simmering from the night before, boiled over. "I want you gone today. This is my hotel, and you don't belong here. Your birth was a mistake that Mother should never have made. Nobody here wants you. Nobody." Pedro's voice was calm, but his words carried weight. "Are you saying Mother doesn't want me here? Interesting. I'll have to confront her about that. I'd like to hear it from her directly. Why would she send you, her loyal messenger, to deliver such hurtful words to her own son?" Marcia froze, her confidence cracking. Panic set in. If he confronts Mother, she'll know everything. She warned me not to treat him badly. What have I done? Trying to regain control, she sneered. "Stop acting like the spoiled child you've always been. Grow up, Pedro." Pedro's gaze pierced through her facade, his voice low and anguished. "What is it, Marcia? Are you afraid? Afraid I'll finally ask Mother about what you've said? You've hated me for as long as I can remember, and I've asked you why countless times. You've never given me a real answer." Marcia's expression turned cold once more. "I don't owe you anything. And I certainly don't owe you an explanation. Leave my hotel." Pedro exhaled sharply, his composure returning. Don't worry, Marcia. I'll be gone tomorrow. A satisfied smirk crept across her face. Good. At least you've finally accepted that this hotel belongs to me. You're nothing more than what grandfather left behind. I hope I don't have to force you out. As her venom spilled, a knock at the door interrupted them. Pedro opened it to find Selena standing there, her presence as commanding as ever. Good morning, Pedro. Why didn't you stay at the house? Selena's tone was calm but inquisitive. Before Pedro could respond, Marcia swooped in. Good morning, Mom. What brings you here so early? Selena's sharp instincts caught the tension in her daughter's voice. Marcia, since when do I need to explain myself? I'm here to see my son and invite him to lunch. But you haven't even given him the chance to greet me. Leave, Marcia. Go to your office, there's plenty of work to be done. Marcia's jaw tightened, but she obeyed. With a nod, she turned and left. Pedro finally spoke. Good morning, Mom. I thought it would be easier for everyone if I stayed at the hotel. I didn't want to intrude on your or Marcia's privacy. Selena studied him for a moment, her expression softening. I understand, Pedro. But I'm not taking no for an answer about lunch. Pedro managed a small smile. Where do you want to have lunch, Mom? Let's have it here, at the hotel. The hotel, if you wish. That sounds great. What time? How does 1:30 p.m. sound? Perfect. I'll see you then. Selena gave a small nod and left the room. Meanwhile, in her office, Marcia sat restless. She was consumed by the lies she'd spun to her brother and the chilling moment she saw Selena enter Pedro's room. The coldness in Selena's demeanor toward her only deepened her unease. Marcia's thoughts spiraled until the door opened suddenly, snapping her back to the present. It was Selena. What exactly happened between you and Pedro? Selena's voice was calm, but her eyes were probing. Marcia exhaled in relief, realizing Pedro hadn't mentioned her lies. I don't know what you mean, Mom. I saw you in Pedro's room earlier. Why were you so tense when I walked in? What have you said to him? Nothing, Mom, I swear. I was just concerned. Pedro told me he's leaving tomorrow for France, and I know you want him to stay. So do I. I was just worried you'd be upset. Selena's sharp gaze lingered, unconvinced, but she let the subject drop. I'm having lunch with him today to try to persuade him to stay. He belongs here. Marcia, ever the hypocrite, smiled thinly. That's a great idea, Mom, but I don't think he'll stay. He seemed so set on leaving. At the Royal Hotel's VIP restaurant, the air was as polished as its chandeliers. Among the carefully chosen staff, Fernanda stood out. A paragon of professionalism, she was fluent in several languages, trained as a sommelier, and adept in the dining etiquette of European royalty. Her beauty and grace only added to her allure, and guests frequently requested her assistance, trusting her to pair the perfect wine with their meals. When Pedro entered the restaurant, a hush seemed to fall over the room. His quiet handsomeness captivated the staff, who whispered among themselves about the elusive heir to the Royal Hotel empire. They knew he was single, wealthy, and, most intriguing, a mystery. Pedro, tense and aware that Marcia could appear at any moment to stir trouble, sat down. A concierge approached him politely. Would you like something to drink, sir? Orange juice, please, Pedro replied with a faint smile. Moments later, Selena arrived, exuding her usual authority. She greeted Pedro warmly and took her seat. Pedro, she began, we need to talk about the hotel. It's time you started thinking seriously about your heritage. You need to learn how to manage our hotels, just as Marcia has. Pedro sighed, his frustration barely masked. Mom, you know I don't want to manage the hotel chain. I'm leaving for France tomorrow. Marcia has dreamed of running the Royal Hotel her entire life. Let her have it. Selena's expression darkened. Dreams don't equate to capability, Pedro. This isn't about what she wants. It's about what's best for the business. Pedro's tone grew sharper. Please, Mom, let me decide what's best for me. As his words hung in the air, Marcia walked in, her presence as disruptive as ever. She slid into a seat, her smile as artificial as the politeness she feigned. "Have you ordered lunch yet, Pedro?" Selena asked. "No, Mom, I was waiting for you." Selena signaled a concierge, and the trio placed their orders. As they waited, Marcia's curiosity couldn't be contained. "What were you talking about before I came in?" "I was telling Pedro that he needs to learn how to manage the hotels," Selena answered coolly. Marcia, ever the strategist, responded with faux concern. "Mom, I don't think you should pressure Pedro into something he's not ready for. He's young. Let him enjoy life for a bit longer. Some people need more time." At that moment, the concierge returned with their drinks, placing the glasses gently on the table. Marcia seized the opportunity to assert her dominance. "Did you not notice that the hotel owners are having a private conversation? You should have excused yourself first." The young woman flushed with embarrassment. "I apologize, Mrs. Marcia." Marcia's expression remained icy. "I'll speak with your manager later. Make sure they meet me in my office this afternoon." Pedro's jaw tightened as he watched his sister humiliate the concierge. Selena, her eyes narrowing in disapproval, intervened. "Marcia, why would you treat our staff that way?" She apologized. "That was uncalled for. Go find the manager now and bring them here. We'll discuss this at home." Marcia, caught off guard, reluctantly obeyed and left the table. Pedro exhaled deeply, his frustration evident. "Mom, this is exactly why I can't work with her. If I stay, it'll just be more of this nonsense. The staff deserves respect. They're the backbone of the Royal Hotel. If they feel mistreated, they'll leave, and the hotel's reputation will crumble." Selena regarded her son with a newfound admiration. "That's precisely why I need you here, Pedro." The manager arrived promptly, bowing his head in deference to Selena and Pedro. Selena instructed him to grant the concierge a free night's stay at the hotel, complete with meals, as a gesture of appreciation. The manager expressed his gratitude and left. Pedro smiled faintly. "Thank you, Mom." Marcia returned just in time to witness the manager's departure, her face a mixture of anger and disbelief. Selena fixed her with a steely glare. "I just corrected your mistake, Marcia. Our employees deserve respect, and I expect you to treat them with it from now on." Marcia, seething but unable to argue, rose from the table and stormed off. The next day, Pedro boarded a flight back to France. When he arrived at his mansion in the south of France, his thoughts lingered on the events at the restaurant. Days later, he made a decision. He enrolled in a business administration program, determined to carve his own path. Before leaving for France, however, he had hired a private investigator to find any trace of his father. Months passed with no news, and the weight of uncertainty gnawed at Pedro. Despite his luxurious surroundings, his life was hollow. He had no friends, no romantic connections, and a pervasive sadness that stemmed from the unanswered questions about his father's disappearance. Years later, Pedro graduated. One day, upon returning home, his butler handed him an envelope. Inside was a report from the investigator, fragmentary information, but enough to ignite hope. Pedro decided to return home without informing anyone of his plans. The following day, he arrived unannounced at Selena's house. As he parked his car, Marcia was stepping out. She squinted at the tinted windows, her curiosity piqued. When Pedro emerged, her expression hardened. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. "I thought you'd finally decided to forget about us for good." "Good morning to you too, Marcia," Pedro said, his tone measured and calm. "I'm here to take my place in hotel management." Marcia's laugh was cold, sharp, and dripping with disdain. "Why don't you stick to living your pathetic life as the failure you've always been? Can't you see you'll never handle the challenges this job will bring? You're just like your father, a miserable soul who should never have existed. Born for poverty, destined for nothing. And you know what? I won't even bother telling you the rest. You might start crying, just like you did as a child, wailing for a father who abandoned you. Even your own father didn't want you." Pedro stood silently, his face unreadable, refusing to give Marcia the satisfaction of a reaction. At that moment, Selena caught sight of him through the window. Her expression shifted, her stoic mask melting as she rushed outside.